Well, I'm somebody who has said all along that logically speaking, Israel should never have gone in a big way in Gaza. That it was never going to end well for them, and unfortunately, history has proven me correct on this. We're more than a year in, and Gaza is not defeated. I think I pointed out earlier the Hamas is reemerging in northern in Gaza. I mean, Israel had built a corridor in the middle of Gaza, splitting it. The goal was to basically totally pacify the north, where the rocket attacks were primarily coming from that threatened Ashkelon and other things. Hamas is back there coming out of the ground, firing rockets, and Israel will never defeat them. They don't understand what Hamas has accomplished here. And I've also said that I didn't think Israel was going to go into Lebanon in a large way because the outcome is inevitable. Israel will not win. Well, the IDF has announced they've gone in with 20,000 troops. That's a significant number of troops. But mainly these are troops operating on the immediate border area. As you said, the deepest penetration is under 2 kilometers. As they try to probe in deeper, they're getting hit. They're walking into ambushes. They're running into the teeth of the Hezbollah defenses. And this is a war that Israel wasn't prepared to fight when, if there was no other diversions with a fresh army. But now they're bringing an army that's been worn down by more than a year's worth of fighting. That's exhausted physically. The logistics are screwed up because they don't have the spare parts required to sustain this effort. And they're backing it up with a lot of airstrikes and everything. They use some cute tricks, assassinating leadership, blowing up pagers that caused momentary disruption. But as both Hezbollah and Iran have said, that whatever Israel accomplished with these trick plays, and I call them trick plays because I'd like to point out that teams don't win championships with trick plays. You win championships with fundamentals. And the fundamentals of war is that Israel will not prevail in southern Lebanon. The Hezbollah has had 18 years to prepare for this very thing. Nothing Israel's doing is taking Hezbollah by surprise. Nothing. Hezbollah knows the kind of weapon systems Israel has. They know the effects. They've made preparations for this, and they're going to lure Israel in and kill them. Remember the tunnels that Hamas has. Hezbollah has been digging similar tunnels. The tunnels will be used when the time is right. Bring the Israelis in deep enough, cut them off, kill them, and you'll find that there's far more tunnels that reach deeper inside Israel than Israel knows. Israel, found a handful of them and are blowing them up and talking about them, but there's more. There's always more because they've had 18 years to prepare. You don't think in 18 years all they did is put out 3 tunnels that crossed into the, right across the border. No, they've put tunnels that go in deeper. And just take a look at the scope and scale of some of the tunnels that existed in Gaza that Israel has found. One of them, basically, you could drive a tank all the way up through right to the border. That's how big the tunnel was. I would imagine that Hezbollah has tunnels of that size all over the place. But the ground war is not going to go well for Israel here. They have an air war, but what they're doing in the air war is it's a repeat of Gaza. Now they're treating Beirut as an extension of Gaza. It's collective punishment, and it will just further alienate Israel from the international community. And here's the key. Now we're getting into the defeat. Israel is going to be a lot like the United States in Vietnam. I mean, study the war in Vietnam. We won just about every tactical engagement there was. I mean, of course, there's a couple times, platoon overrun here, company overrun there. But generally speaking, when the Marines went out and hook and jab with the NVA, we won. We killed them. They withdrew, and then we withdrew from the hill that we just captured, and the NVA came back, and we had to go fight for that hill all over again. We had to fight for the valley all over again. That's the way, and that's what's happening to Israel and Gaza right now. They come in, they take a piece of terrain, they think they have it. They don't, because they don't know what's going on underneath. They withdraw, Hamas comes back, and you have to come back and fight for the same terrain all over again. It's the 4th or 5th time that Israel's given up this territory, and they pay a price in blood and equipment each time. And that's going to happen to them in Lebanon as well. Clausewitz wrote, "War is an extension of politics by other means." I mean, that's sort of a synopsis of a longer phrase. But what that means is that if we try to evaluate a conflict from military engagements alone, we're missing the big picture. This conflict Israel has set certain goals and objectives. For instance, with Hamas, Israel says that the goal is the physical destruction of Hamas as a resistance force, meaning that Israel want to make sure Hamas will never again be able to launch an attack like they did on October 7th. And the destruction of Hamas as a political force. That means that Hamas will not play any role in the governing of whatever Palestinian entity exists when this conflict is over. Israel has failed on both accounts. Hamas is powerful. Sinwar is the leader. He hasn't been killed. And the resistance fighters, are not only continuing the resistance, but they've recouped many of their losses. One of the things about bombing civilian populations, especially in a guerrilla type conflict, is for every terrorist you kill, you end up killing a whole bunch of innocent civilians, which means that you create new terrorists, new resistance fighters who come out. And Hamas has, I think, claimed that they've brought in 3,000 recruits during this time. And they say, well, what about training? Well, they're resistance fighters in Gaza. Sinwar talks about children of the camp. These are all children of the camp. Every one of the fighters he has is a child of camp. What that means is that you were born and raised in Gaza. You know Gaza like the back of your hand. And that's the key. They know Gaza like the back of their hand. The Israelis don't. They're coming in. It's foreign territory. And they're never going to win. That's the same thing in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah spent 18 years preparing for this. They've walked every inch of that ground. They have everything pre-designated. They have their ambushes set up. And Israel is just going to walk into one trap after another trap after another trap. It'll go on forever. Israel has said that their goal and objective now with Hezbollah is to eliminate it as a political entity and as a military entity. They've altered that. It was simply to get them behind the Litani River. They're not going to be physically able to do that. But now they've said, no, we want to eliminate them. Well, they're not going to do that. So Israel's set unattainable goals. What's happened to Israel in setting these unattainable goals? Israel's destroying itself. And this is why the article is about the end of Israel. Economically, Israel is a basket case. In September of 2023, September 9th, Joe Biden was in New Delhi, India, where he announced this new initiative called the India-Middle East European Economic Corridor. This is a grand plan designed to defeat the Chinese Belts and Roads Initiative, to serve as a counter to the Suez Canal route, to serve as a counter to Russia's St. Petersburg, to the Persian Gulf rail network. And the key to this was Israel. Israel is the heart, because it goes from India to the United Arab Emirates, up then through rail lines that connected to Saudi Arabia, into Jordan, into Israel, to Haifa, and then from Haifa by container ship to a port in Greece. Benjamin Netanyahu that same day put out a press release. He said, "This is the most important thing that's happened to Israel ever." He said, "This will change the face of the Middle East and Israel forever." He said, "This is what makes Israel the greatest economic potential of the region. Israel will become the heartbeat of a new reformed and revitalized regional economy." He was so happy about this. This is what Israel's always been waiting for, the chance to grow up into a mature nation at peace with its neighbors, dominating its neighbors economically, being invited to the table, having their voice listened to and obeyed by Arabs. This was it. This was the greater Israel that Netanyahu had always been dreaming of. After October 7th, this initiative is dead in the water. It's just not going to happen. I'll tell you the main reason why is that a key aspect of this initiative was that Israel had to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. They were on the cusp of doing this. Literally, they were very close to this normalization, part of the Abrams Accords. Saudi Arabia now has said that while they haven't shut the door on normalization, they will not normalize relations with Israel until which time there's a Palestinian state and its capital's in Jerusalem. Israel has said under Netanyahu that this will never happen. So if Israel says it's never going to happen, then relations will never be normalized, which means the India, Middle East, European economic corridor is never going to happen. The greatest thing ever to happen to Israel will never happen. And this is just the beginning of the bad economic news, because now Israel will never have a chance to become this powerhouse that it wanted to become. Instead, the reality sets in. Last year, Israel took a $67 billion economic hit. This doesn't include the cost of the war. This is just loss of tourism, unemployment, loss of jobs, lack of investment. Nobody's investing in Israel right now because it's a horrible place to invest. Israel's become a place that many people don't want to live in. It's funny, I wrote this article, then almost immediately the BBC played an interview with somebody who made the same arguments. He said that nobody wants to raise children here. Nobody wants to. This isn't where your families come. This isn't where you come to retire. This isn't the land of milk and honey. This is a place where every day you have to worry about missiles raining down on you. People are fleeing their homes. It's completely unstable from an economic standpoint, and that translates into societal instability. There's a significant percentage of Israelis who hold dual passports, and it's not just the physical holding of the passport, but the fact that the vast majority of the Israelis come from Europe, and the way European law is that if you can trace your lineage back to, I think, through your parents to your grandparents, that you can claim citizenship and get your passport. And we're starting to see Israelis flee Israel, and when they start to flee in significant numbers, you get a demographic shift that's not in favor of a greater Israel. It's in favor of not just a two-state solution, but a one-state solution called Palestine. And this is the reality. Israel is no longer a viable nation state. They're holding things together through military force and intimidation. But at some point in time, Israel has to find a way to become economically viable. It's impossible. The Houthi have carried out an effective economic blockade of Israel's second largest port, the port of Eilat in the south. No ships are coming through, no economic activity. Haifa is now under attack. That's the most important port, and that's going to shut down. The world's going to stop doing business with Israel because it's been recognized internationally as an apartheid state that's carrying out genocide in violation of international law. And slowly but surely, Israel is going to become this isolated non-entity. Nobody's going to want to do business with it. People are going to flee. And again, you get the demographics to drop to a certain point, and the Israeli state ceases to exist just on its own volition. So this is the reality of losing this conflict. Israel's in the process of not just losing the military aspect of this war, but losing the political aspect. It's not Hamas and Hezbollah that's being threatened with being eliminated as entities. It's the state of Israel. Israel is an unsustainable entity given the current circumstances, and there's no reason to believe that the current circumstances are going to change to the betterment of Israel. They can't defeat Hamas, they can't defeat Hezbollah, and if they try to attack Iran, they will be eliminated.
Yeah, and I think all those points are important to take into account given what is going on right now in Lebanon. There's this a reality that is very striking. You've mentioned that Israel is living by the sword and is now dying or perishing by the sword. I've heard you say this, and I think it's so interesting that just one year after it ignited this genocidal campaign in Gaza that, as you said, has not been successful, at least if we look at its stated aims with regard to Hamas and the Palestinian resistance. But now it feels like an even bigger quagmire is opening up that is very similar, I think, in many ways to your comparison to Vietnam, where now they are fighting an even stronger, more organized, and more well-equipped guerrilla force that also has a modicum of political power. And I wanted to get to this, actually, Scott, because the Wall Street Journal has reported that, and this is what's I think is very important for people to understand, that the United States is seeing Israel's ground invasion and overall campaign in Lebanon as an opportunity to displace and unseat, aka regime change, Hezbollah in Lebanon. So I wanted to ask you about this in the context of what you were saying in terms of how Israel is expanding this field of conflict, but doing so not in an advantageous position, actually quite the opposite. I'm curious on your thoughts on this.
Well, it's interesting that one of the go-to moves that Israel's considering right now as part of the Hezbollah displacement is to breathe life back into what was called the Southern Lebanese Army, SLA. Israel created this after their invasion in 1982 and their occupation of southern Lebanon. They created the Southern Lebanese Army. And it was a horrible group of disaffected Muslims, Christians who raped, pillaged, murdered. They had no support, and Hezbollah defeated them and kicked Israel out in 2000. And then the SLA ceased to exist. But Israel's going back to that model, which means that's all they know. The United States has a policy that treats Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, and we have been trying for some time now by enacting sanctions that target Lebanon and sanctioning Hezbollah to split Hezbollah out of the Lebanese body politic. But it hasn't worked. Hezbollah has actually become a viable political party, one of the most powerful political forces in Lebanon. It is part of the Lebanese government. What we're saying is that, when we say we want to, push Hezbollah aside, we're declaring war against Lebanon. And that's the difference in the past. You see, in the past, when Israel occupied Lebanon, Hezbollah was not considered an extension of Lebanon. Hezbollah was a resistance group primarily in the south of Lebanon, but it was at odds with the Lebanese government and with other militias. The Amal militia, Hezbollah was derived from it, but there were some clashes there. Definitely the Sunni Arabs, the Druze, the Christians, they were all opposed to Hezbollah. And many of them collaborated with the Israelis to take on Hezbollah or take on the Shia. Today, the dynamic has changed. What we've seen before Israel went into southern Lebanon were the various factions making it clear that they stood with Hezbollah because they stood with Lebanon and they viewed Hezbollah as part of Lebanon. What we're trying to do is recreate the 1980s and 1990s in Lebanon. We're trying to go back to a time where we had influence, we had levers that we could control. But I think Lebanon has moved past that. I think it's a mistake to believe that Lebanon will revert to, the kind of divisions that existed that could be exploited, that we were exploiting, Israel sought to exploit in the 1980s, 1990s. I think Hezbollah now is part of Lebanon, and that you can't separate the two without destroying Lebanon. That's what Israel's trying to do. Understand what's happening here. This bombardment of Lebanon is, again, I hope I pronounce. I think it's Dahwa, the name of the southern Beirut. I don't know if you ever saw the meme. I used to have trouble pronouncing the Bab el Mandeb.
Yeah, I remember. It's been on this show, on record on this show, that you've had. Yeah, I mean, it's not
and
easy.
they showed this meme that was hilarious because it showed me just screwing it up, and finally I said it right, and they're like, "Whoa, yay!" And so I know that I'm screwing up the name, and I don't mean to be humorous here, but sometimes you have to have humor or else you get depressed, because what's happening to Lebanon is depressing. I have friends there. I know everybody does,
Yeah,
but
it's horrible.
I met this family. They came to New York in June, and a wonderful family, and they came to, remember when I used to talk about doing the Central Park, reviving the 1982 Central Park demonstration, the million-person march, and I really was trying to do that, but I ran into a reality check which said New York City was never going to allow this to happen. And so we moved away to, trying to create waging peace documentaries and all that. But I guess I forgot to make the public announcement, because when they heard it the first time, the wife, a wonderful lady, she went to her husband and said, "We're taking vacation in June. We're going to New York City, and we are going to be part of this demonstration." And they did all the plans. They bought the tickets. They got everything locked up. And her husband and her daughter flew to New York City. And then she's like, "Well, there's no meeting. There's no rally. What happened?" and she contacted me through Jeff Norman, my co-host on Ask the Inspector, and said, "Hey, we're here." And I said, "Well, I'll meet with you." And so I went down to New York City and had a wonderful lunch with them and talked with them and got to know them. And they're just fantastic people, really salt of the earth type of people. They live in Beirut, and every day, I hear the bombing, I send them a message, just to making sure they're okay, because I'm very worried about them, and I know there's people that have loved ones there and friends and family, and they're worried about them. And unfortunately, many thousands of them have died, and many thousands more are going to die because Israel doesn't give a damn about these people. Israel is carrying out a policy of collective punishment, and Israel knows it's going to get away with it because it's already slaughtered Palestinians, committed genocide, and it's gotten away with it. Nobody's doing anything to stop them. So Israel's now focused on bombing Lebanon, and the goal is to inflict so much pain on the Lebanese people that they rise up and reject Hezbollah. But I have a feeling that it's going to backfire, that the people aren't going to rise up against Hezbollah because they consider Hezbollah to be part of the Lebanese social and political fabric. And this will just harden the resolve of Lebanese against Israel and against the United States. It's a horrific gamble on the part of the United States to use Israeli genocide, because this is the genocide of the Lebanese people. It is. Mm-hmm. They're treated as a subhuman class, and they're being murdered with no consequence. And America has attached itself to this policy because somehow we think through this genocide we can achieve a policy objective vis-a-vis Hezbollah. It's a sickening reality of American policy that, I mean, everybody says that they know this about America, and we should know, because we did it in Iraq. We killed millions. We did it in Afghanistan, killed millions. We don't care. And we'll do it again in Lebanon, either directly with our own bombs. We've done that in the past, or indirectly using Israel as a proxy. But we'll kill as many as necessary to achieve this. We don't shed tears over dead Arabs. We don't shed tears over dead brown people. That's just a harsh reality of it. Although I have to say that this family was whiter than I am, so when I say dead brown people, it's just stupid. I mean, we don't even know what we're talking about when we talk about Arabs and the Lebanese and the Levant and the wonderful mix of, she's a Russian. She's from Lugansk. She married her husband, who is from Beirut, but he's a Christian, I believe, and I'm sure there's French blood, and there might be other blood, and it's just all this wonderful mix. That's what makes Lebanon such a wonderfully diverse country, is this blend of Mediterranean cultures and peoples and internationalism. And now they're being bombed by this hate-filled genocidal maniac named Benjamin Netanyahu, and Netanyahu's being supported in this by the ignorant Americans who are so indifferent to Arab suffering that we're willing to let Israel commit genocide of the Lebanese people so we can attain an unattainable objective with Hezbollah. It's not going to work. America will fail on this, like we failed on everything. This is an open challenge I have for anybody. And if you see an answer in there, put it up there, and I'd love to hear it. I challenge anybody in your audience right now to tell me one thing America's done since the end of the Cold War that's been beneficial for mankind. One policy initiative, because all I see is us bombing Serbia, expanding NATO, taking out Muammar Gaddafi, allowing Libya to collapse, illegal war of aggression against Iraq and Saddam Hussein. I challenge anybody to give me one thing, just one, that America's done that says, oh, America cares about the world. We don't. All we do is death and destruction. We have become literally the global pariah. We are the worst nation in the world when it comes to treating the world. And it's not just the big ticket stuff. What have we said about Congo? What about the cobalt and all the other rare minerals that are pulled out of the ground in the Congo by little children who rush down there with their hands, and they do this, poisoning their bodies, and they're going to die a miserable death with half the life expectancy? What about the millions of Congolese who have died in the ongoing fighting that takes place, which we facilitate because we want that kind of chaos so that we can gain access to these materials which we need for our cell phones? America has done that. That's what we do. That's what we're all about. We have done nothing good We have a military-industrial complex that can only exist when there are constant state of crises in the world. So we facilitate the crises. And when it might sound like a little policy thing that the stupid Georgetown postgraduate people talk about in their little seminars, but each one of these policy things about generating crisis results in dead human beings, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, and it's all America's fault. We haven't done anything that's good, nothing. Everything we've done is bad. And I hate to say that as an American, but it's the truth. There's not one single foreign policy initiative that we've undertaken that was done for the benefit of humanity.